A couple of places we're going to be reading this morning that I want you to find in your Bibles or on your app on your phone. And that one is in Luke chapter 15, reading a small segment of the story of the prodigal son. I'll just tell you up front, kind of to ruin the story for you, we're going to ruin the story for you. We're just going to tell a little bit of it, and we're going to just go into that briefly. We're not going to go into the whole story, but it is an important part. That song that kind of led in is helping us understand, and it'll give us a good picture of what reckless love looks like. And then we want to also remember that for the whole month, we're using Psalm 139. And so we're going to be back in Psalm 139, beginning at verse 7 and running through verse 12. So first of all, Luke chapter 15, beginning at verse 11. Let's look at this together. There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to him, "Father, give me my share of the property now." And so the man divided the property between the 2 sons, and after a few days the younger son sold his part of the property and left home with his money. He went to a country far away where he wasted his money in reckless living. Skip over now, if you will, to Psalms 139, beginning at verse 7. I can never escape your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride on the wings of morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me. And your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night. But even in darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you, the night shines as bright as the day. Darkness and light are the same to you. I want to open with this question for us to think about for a moment. How do you love? How do you love? How do you love? We learn the most about ourselves and other people by how they love, what they love, and when they love, right? Now, if we don't have my PowerPoints, we might have that picture that I was going to show you of a little friend of mine. And I've never given him a name. His name is just Monkey, okay? For lack of another name. I received him as a gift when I was 1 year old. And as I grew up, I kept him and preserved him and kept him in really good shape. All the way until I was 12 years old, this monkey was in great shape. And after that, not so much, all right? So what happened after my 12th birthday? Well, what happened was that 4 days after my 11th birthday, my sister was born. And on my 4 days, of course, after my 12th birthday, my sister is having her birthday party and discovering new gifts and presents, which she is moderately interested in because she has gone into my room, and on top of one of the bookcases, she located Monkey. And she thought that was just the greatest thing in the world and pulled him down and began to play with him. And my sister is the reason he's missing a thumb. My sister is the reason he's got some writing on him. My sister is the reason he's a little more abused. At one point, I caught her stuffing a real banana in his mouth and had to kind of clear that out. But what happened, I had protected him. I had not let anyone touch him or play with him, or I had not done that myself. I was preserving and protecting him. But what happened was, when I saw the joy that it gave my sister to play with this monkey and how much she enjoyed dragging him around, all over the house and spending time with him and setting him up for tea and all these other kinds of things that she began to do over the years, I loved my sister more than I loved the monkey. You see, how we love and what we love tells a tremendous or a great deal about us and about where we are, right? I let this happen because I loved my sister more than I loved this stuffed animal, right? And it gave me such great joy to hear her laughter in the other room when she was playing with him and to know that she was enjoying what was going on. Now, I have to be honest with you that when she would just leave him laying around somewhere, I would drag him back and put him on the shelf. But she would go in there and find him the next day and drag him off to play. And that is the reason that monkey is in pretty bad shape, but I still have him today. Overwhelmed with the knowledge that someone loves you more than they should. That's what reckless love is, right? Being overwhelmed with the knowledge that someone loves you much more than they should love you. We demonstrated that we are unworthy of His love. We're unthankful for His love, at times opposed to His love in our lives, and yet God pursues us and He loves us and He acts on our best interest and our best behalf. And the greatest act of love that was ever accomplished was that even when we didn't love Him, He went to die for us. He went to pay the ultimate price at the cross. He took our sin there, He took our shame, He took our punishment, and instead He gave us salvation. So what is this reckless love trying to accomplish in our lives? And we hit on that last week, and that was our sticky statement. If you weren't here last week, we'll give it to you again. And that is simply that salvation is not tinkering with our old life. It is God giving us a brand new one, right? And remember, we used the analogy. We talked about how, the Best Buy has the Geek Squad, and they send the guy out in his gear, and sometimes we see God that way. He's just coming out to tinker with things and make it all better. And the Best Buy guy, he picks up your computer, and he does wondrous, marvelous little things with it, and he puts on antivirus and all this kind of stuff. And when, he finishes, it works great, and you're like, yes, it's so awesome. I get to keep my computer. I get to hang on to this. He has fixed it. The tech guy has fixed this old computer. And that's what we sometimes see God doing, coming in, tinkering with our life and fixing us until the next disaster, right? Just tinkering with a few things, just getting rid of the error codes, and then God has fixed us. But we talked about last week, that is not what God's doing at all. God is finishing with our old life, and He's giving us a new one. He wants us to have a brand new life. It's as if the Best Buy geek guy comes in and says, your computer is a disaster. Here's a brand new one, right? You just start right here and don't do what you did before. Live differently on this computer than you lived here because you have wrecked this thing. It's horrible. I want you to have something brand new, right? And that's exactly what God is doing for us. He's given us a brand new life. So if we're trying to think of an analogy for us that really would help us understand what God is trying to accomplish in our life, we might better think about the caterpillar who's looking up at the butterfly, right? Caterpillar, he's looking up at the butterfly, and he says to that butterfly, he says, you're never going to get me in one of those things, right? He says, no way, man, I'm happy here on the ground. You're never getting me in one of those things. Meanwhile, God's saying, come on, I've got your cocoon ready. We're going to start working on you. You're going to get a new life. You're going to get a brand new life. You're going to get a new way to think, a new way to live, a new way to love, a new sense of purpose, a new sense of mission. You're going to get a brand new life. And I want to teach you how to live in that brand new life. In the passage that we read a moment ago, after a few days, it says the younger son sold his part of the property and left home with the money. He went to a country far away where he wasted his money in, everyone say it with me, reckless living. He wasted his life in, say it one more time, reckless living. What I've come to discover for my life, and I know for those of you who have walked across the line and made a commitment to Jesus Christ, it takes reckless love for a reckless life, right? It takes reckless love for a reckless life. In his book, The Ragamuffin Gospel, Brennan Manning wrote this, and I wanted to read it to you today. It's just so powerful. Brennan Manning, how many of you have ever read The Ragamuffin Gospel? It's really, really a good book. Would recommend it to you highly. Here's what Brennan Manning, the author, writes about himself. When I get honest, I admit I'm a bundle of paradoxes. I believe and I doubt. I hope and get discouraged. I love and I hate. I feel bad about feeling good. I feel guilty about feeling guilty. I'm trusting and suspicious. I'm honest. I still play games. Aristotle said, I am a rational animal. I say, I am an angel with an incredible capacity for beer. To live by grace means to acknowledge my whole life story, the light side and the dark. In admitting my shadow side, I learn who I am and what God's grace means. And here's the punchline. My deepest awareness of myself is that I am deeply loved by Jesus Christ, and I have done nothing to earn or deserve it. Only a reckless love can cure a reckless life. And all of us are reckless in living. The story of the prodigal is not just a story of financial indiscretion and waste. The story of the prodigal is not just the story of a disrespected father, youthful ingratitude or arrogance in ignorance. Those are ever present in that storyline, but the story of the prodigal son is really the story of a reckless, wasted life. It's the story of one who turns his back and goes the direction that he's drawn to in his own carnal nature and begins to live so recklessly that his life is destroyed and the lives of those around him are destroyed. It is a life that's wrecked, a life that embraced destruction rather than promise, but it is also the story, the prodigal story, of reckless love. I'm giving away the rest of the story that we didn't read if you didn't get a chance to read it, but here it is. It is a story of the father who gives an unearned inheritance. It is a story of a father who waits by the roadside for a wayward son to come home. It is a story of a father who receives him as his son again. It is a story of a father who restores an unearned inheritance. It is a story of reckless love. The wayward son, it is a story of him preparing a speech that he was never able to give. Because of the reckless love into his life, he was left speechless. And it says, Thomas Merton said, and here's how he put it, a saint is not someone who is good, but someone who experiences the goodness of God. A saint is not someone who is good, but someone who experiences the goodness of God. In Psalms 139, beginning verse 7, we read, I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up into heaven, you are there. If I go down into the grave, you are there. If I ride on wings of the morning, if I dwell in the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. Too often, I believe that the love of God for us is more of a mental acknowledgement than it is for a life-changing reality. And it has been, and so that's why God came himself. To change and to get us to see things radically different, God came to make a life-changing reality for every one of us, to show us what love really is. You can't escape his love, the psalmist says. There's no place to hide. It invades your presence, your space. It's covering over like a flood. It overwhelms you at times, riding in on the wings of the morning, penetrating the darkest of souls. He goes on to say, I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in the darkness I cannot hide from you. To you, the night shines as bright as the day. Darkness and light are the same to you. My question for each of us individually this morning is, how are we living our lives recklessly? Are we living recklessly in our finances? Are we living lives recklessly in sexual behaviors? Are we living our lives recklessly with substance abuse? Are we living our lives reckless? Are we being reckless with the truth? Are we living recklessly in the sense that we are reckless in relationships around us, taking the people around us for granted, living a reckless life as if things may never change? Are we living reckless in our lives in any way? It takes a reckless love of God to bring about transformation. I was back a few weeks ago in Arizona, and when I was there, I met an old friend. We've been friends for a very long time, and recently his parents are aged. He has a brother that's handicapped and at home with them, and so it's required him to make a difficult decision where he's had to move back in with his family to take care of them. And in addition to some of the day-to-day care issues that arise and things that need to be done, he's discovered that there is a recklessness with his family there, each one of them, his brother and his mom and his dad, in the sense of their decision making. He said, I always thought that they were very wise when I was growing up and the way they made decisions, but it seems like now it's so frustrating, the decisions that they're making on a day-to-day basis. If I'm not there, it's so challenging. And he shared with me about 3 or 4 stories about where his work required that he had to be away a few days, and he would come back and some salesman had either over the phone or in person at the door sold a product to his family or got them wrapped up in some kind of a contract. And he immediately had to go to work to try to get these things undone. And in at least one instance, he had to secure a lawyer and pay the lawyer fees and get them out of what they had gotten themselves into by signing on the dotted line. Reckless decision making. And I heard the pain in his voice as he was describing this, but in the end he said to me, but I'm doing this because I love my family. I love my parents. They gave me a good life. They raised me. They loved me, and I'll never forget them. A reckless love for reckless living. There's a cost that is encompassed by all of us when we live recklessly. Some of it will take a toll on our lives from that point forward, but certainly on the lives of others that are around us. And into that, God brings to us a reckless love, a brand new life, an opportunity for a transformation that will change us forever. It takes a reckless love for reckless living. If you don't take anything away this morning, I hope you take that away. We have been so reckless in our day-to-day decision making, in our choices, in the way we have lived our lives. And yet God has ever pursued us with a reckless love, heading towards us on a collision course to say, I love you so deeply, I want to get rid of the old life and give you a brand new life, that you can walk in this new life and become what I've called you to become. The truth of the story is that we have never gone after God. God came after us. Yeah. We all wanted to tell a good story about ourselves that at some point we, recognized it was good to pursue God. But when we look back on our life, we see we were pursuing our own interests, our own desires, our own life goals and dreams. And God was pursuing us all the time, coming after us. It is a love that God brings to our lives that doesn't make sense at times to us, but it is a love that covers over sin, according to 1 Peter 4:8. A gracious and beautiful love that was paid for on a blood-stained cross. Jesus came recklessly for your reckless life. He paid the price. He gave himself up. It is a love that we didn't deserve. And for us, it seems extremely reckless. In God's perspective, as we talked about last week, it is not reckless at all. But to us, it's like, wow. I was living completely recklessly. God came into my life, rescued me out of those circumstances and situations. How much He loves us. How much He cares about us. The prodigal is every bit as much a story of that kind of reckless love. A father who had no reason to hope, but hoped anyway. A father who stood out to watch for a son he hoped would come home. Would make that 180 we talked about last week and recognize that the wrecking of his life could end and the hope of a new life could begin if he just came home. And what's incredible about this reckless love is that it not only does it bring us together and we have this sense of commonality and when we become members of the family of God, it brings us together, but it also sends us out, right? There is no way to keep this a secret. When you have engaged in the love of Jesus Christ, when that reckless love has wrecked your life, there's no way to keep it just to yourself. We don't have religion, we have a relationship with a living God. There are people who have religion and they like to keep it private, right? But I don't have religion. I have a relationship, a personal relationship with a living Son of God. Amen. And as a result of that, it pushes me out to tell others about it. Yes. So it's not only a gathering kind of love that we come here to worship, but as we go out those doors, it is a spreading of the good news of the love of Jesus Christ. It's why the four gospel writers are often called in theological circles the evangelists. They're telling about the good news of Jesus Christ. Amen. Jesus didn't leave us a signed book. Jesus didn't leave us written down copies, words. He depended on others to copy down what He had said and put in record. What He brought us was Himself. A personal relationship with Jesus Christ. He came Himself. He didn't leave you a book of, to-dos and a book of how to improve your life and how to lose weight. Jesus came Himself to embrace you, to love you, and to tell you that He is forever pursuing you. He wants you to be a member of His family. I'm going to invite our worship team to come back. The overwhelming, reckless love of God. I love the verses in that song, or especially the chorus part where it talks about how that, there's nothing that can hold back His love. It kicked walls down. And that has been the story of my life. God has always been pursuing me. Even when I thought that, I was doing things right and yet deeply knew through conviction I was doing things wrong. He pursued me in love, corrected me, brought me back to Himself. Will you stand with me this morning? The overwhelming, reckless love of God. Can we just take the moment while we're singing together and just worship Him and thank Him for that reckless love? Embrace Him and embrace God's love instead of us at times in our lives have pushed it back. But today, let's say we're just open, God, to what You want to accomplish and what You want to do.